Welcome to Small Talk by Sfarim Chatter. I'm Nachi Weinstein. On this episode of Small Talk, I'm going to be joined by Rena Lauer, who is the wife of Rabbi Simcha Lauer, Zechron Levracha, and we'll be discussing the new 2-volume book or Sfarim that were just published, Contemporary Questions, Halachic Answers, tackling the halachic questions of real-world scenarios based on the weekly Parsha, which was published by Adir Press. And I will mention at the outset that I had Rabbi Simcha on, Zechron Levracha, on the podcast right in the beginning, episode number 49, on his previous book, Learning the News, Halachic Perspectives on Current Events, which was published by Mosaica. And that was in the early days of Sfarim Chatter, all the way in the beginning. And that was actually one of the first kind of podcasts on, I don't know, like that type of book, like more a contemporary type of book, interestingly. So thank you. Let's now turn to this book, or books, if you will. So thank you, Rena, for joining me.
My pleasure. It's an exciting opportunity to be able to share Simcha's legacy. The book is called Contemporary Questions, Halachic Answers, as you said. And it's a series of articles which takes unique modern-day news stories and analyzes them through a halachic lens. But this time, they're all organized by the Parsha. So the middle of that is that you can just pull out the book at a Shabbos table, open up to this week's Parsha, and pick that chapter to read as part of your Shabbos table discussion. After each news story, there's a question, like how would halacha view this story? And so some people have told me that what they like to do is they pause there and they kind of see what the people at the table have to say, which is how Simcha used to lead his chaburas. He would have Friday night chaburas on these stories as they were in progress for the books. And it really gets to be a lively discussion. And then there is the discussion that really analyzes it pretty thoroughly from a halachic perspective. So it's really, if you remember the first book, Learning the News, it's the same idea. It's just now 2 books so that it covers every single parsha organized by the general topic of that parsha.
Yeah, and it's really unlike news pieces, just to pick up on what he said. And I want to ask you what his interest was in that. But I just opened it up to this week's Parsha. We're recording this, Bahar B'Chesed, right? So Parshas Bahar, he has little pieces on the side. It's like a sticky note. It's actually nice how they did it. It says, in the news. And the title is The Ringing Phone on Shabbos. And it says, like, Ben Brafman, a prominent Orthodox criminal lawyer, relates the following anecdote about being approached by Sean Combs, so by Diddy, a high-profile secular celebrity. And it says how he told him that he required Brafman to give him his phone number to be available 24/7. And Brafman said, I will gladly pick up the phone whenever you want, but I don't answer on Shabbos. I'm from. And it says one Shabbos he called, and he did call. And he kept calling, and he didn't call. And after he told him, he said he tried to call around 1,000 times. And he told him, Holmes told him, I was sitting with some friends last night, telling them how you put religion ahead of business and do not pick up the phone on the Sabbath. They argue it's impossible, and you would not ignore a telephone phone for an important client like me. I made a bet with over $10,000, and you did not disappoint me. You didn't answer the phone. So then now it relates the story with your daughter. It comes like Simcha brings in a personal thing, and then turns to end off the story, then turn to a Torah perspective. And then there's a whole piece on the Torah perspective, and we can get to another example, and then there's a summary. Now, I do want to ask you, though, because the last book was on Learning the News. Now this is like you can kind of get a feel, kind of like that type of story, and like what's going on, something that was like, where was his interest in the news come from, that he was interested in this and in analyzing things from a Torah angle?
Okay, so when Simcha and I were dating in 2013, we were both going into education. I think we were both going for our masters. And he said to me casually, I think a lot of schools aren't presenting Torah the right way. They're just not teaching it right. I remember thinking, okay, big shot. Do you have a better idea? Like, from where I come from, we follow the methods of education that they teach us. And we don't challenge unless we have a way to fix it. But in fact, he did have a better idea. Simcha felt really strongly that the way to reach people, to teach them Torah, is through the world around us, through the interesting and exciting topics in the news that they're reading and discussing anyways. And then we can show them what the Torah actually has to say on these topics. And then they realize that Torah is really rich and relevant because it is. And that's how he saw the world. But he felt that, unfortunately, most people don't realize that. They think there's the news, there's the world, And then there's Torah, so make some time to learn on the side.
So was this something that he was interested, that he actually did, like practically, like you were saying, like you said he had chaburas, but like by your Shabbos too, was it what it was like? He would be like, oh, the news this week, I saw this. Now let me say the story over, and let me now go
Indeed.
through like practically Torah.
Indeed, but he knew his audience. So my kids are pretty young. So I'll tell you, this was really just how he lived his life, because Torah was so exciting for him. He just brought Torah out to everyone in an exciting way, but in an age-appropriate way. So in our home each week, Simcha would prepare Parsha questions. At one point, it was bingo with little chocolate lentils for each bingo square that you got right. It got too competitive, so it became questions with very good candy. He had activities to act out things from the Parsha. He had snacks. He had stories. The kids called it Parsha Fun because it was just always fun, and they were so excited about it. When he would make a siyum on a Masechta, he was doing Daf Yomi. He did a full cycle, and he was in the middle of another cycle. He would tell me, oh, we have a siyum on Thursday night, so like order something yummy for dinner. I would ask, do you want to invite neighbors? We could have a minyan. He said no. He wanted his kids there. So we'd have good food that he knew they liked, and he would make the Masechta into a PowerPoint. And he would, and it would have pictures so the kids could understand what it was about. And he made it really simple. He just wanted them to understand what it was about. If they listened nicely, they got dessert. He took out his guitar. He would play some songs. They would dance, and we would celebrate. And that was really how he saw Torah. It was fun. It was his name. It was Simcha. But it was a deep internal Simcha. He wasn't a loud person. He wasn't really out there, if you remember him from the first podcast. But it was his favorite activity. One of his favorite activities was going to the farm store. So I think that's how he found your podcast way back. He just desperately wanted to know what was new. He couldn't miss a book that came out. And when he would go in there, I could get as many errands as I wanted done while he circled the store. He was like a kid in a candy store. I would joke that if there was a Jewish sefer, we have it. And even if it's a kid's Jewish book, we also have it. He told me that his favorite apartment ever was Rav Ovadia Yosef's because there were no walls. There were only wall-to-wall svarim. And that's how we wanted our home to look. And if you see behind me, you could see the video. He almost succeeded. There's a little bit of wall space on the other side. But that was really true to him. It wasn't just something he put on for a good book to sell. He lived it, he breathed it, and he knew he was going to get it out there.
Now, this book, like the other one, as you mentioned, it tackles contemporary kind of questions of where and news type of thing. It's also like the other one. It's news. It was again through a Torah lens. So, as you mentioned, this is what he felt as it pertains to education, as it pertains to people living their life. He wanted to bring this into their everyday life, not like you explained so well before. But was this book was the culmination of that? He was trying to use this as a vehicle to teach others, this mahalach, if you will?
Exactly. And it was years in the making. All three of them are really from the same compilation. When we had that conversation and I said, so what's your idea? He actually had an idea. And he showed me that he had been already in 2013, before we met, compiling news stories. So he would scan the headlines every day. I remember there was an app. He didn't really want to have to open every news site and deal with, whatever he would find. So there was an app that only showed you the headlines. He could just skim through hundreds of headlines in a few minutes. So whenever he wanted a break, he would skim through the headlines. It was called Newsflash. And he would grab any headlines that were interesting. He would find the story, put the story into a Word document, and he would save it entitled, Mafia Questions. And he would come up with a halachic question, and they're really good if you look at some of the questions, what happens if you made a business deal while you were sleeping? What happens if you sold your Olam Haba on Amazon? He has really good questions. So he would ask the question, and then he would save the document on his computer. And then for years, as he was learning anything and everything, or listening to a shiur or a podcast, if he heard something that related to that piece, he would quickly write it up in the document. So what you end up with in the Torah perspective part of each chapter is a very rich discussion filled with, obviously, the Torah source, the Gemara, the Rishonim, the Achronim, contemporary poskim, some of which he went to hear them speak and then would corner them afterwards and say, well, what do you think about this Lamaisa? If someone actually sold their Olam Haba, what would you say? And so he has psukim from like Rav Mordechai Willig, and he'll say in the footnote, told to the author on Shabbos, etc. But he has a really impressive list of sources because he wasn't writing it under any pressure or time limit. It was a several year long process until he felt it was sufficiently dealt with each and every story.
Do you have any particular example that you want to highlight for the listener?
Yeah, I picked one. I opened it up and I opened up to Chai Sarah. So to show you how he connects it to the parsha, he gives a small pasuk about how Eliezer is looking for a wife for Yitzchak. His job is to find a wife and then present the wife to her. So he entitles the chapter after that called Proposal Pranks. It's on page 68 in book 1. And I'll read you the first news story just so like you have a sense of, and he has several stories on each piece, but just to show you how he picked anything and everything that got his attention. And his assumption was that if it got his attention, it'll get other people's. So this one says, in the news, July 2016, 3 New York police officers from the 101st Precinct in Far Rockaway faked a traffic stop to help Yehuda propose to his girlfriend Sarah in Queens. The officers were asked to help by a member of the Borough Park Shomrim. The police officers pulled over Sarah's car on suspicion that she and her boyfriend were trafficking weapons and drugs in the trunk. After questioning Sarah about her boyfriend's allegedly suspicious activities, the officers insisted that she open her trunk, which she did, releasing the balloons that had been stashed inside. Yehuda then got down on one knee and asked Sarah to marry him. So there are several other stories, but I'll just read you the questions he asks at the end of this section, which I think are really great because it shows that his mind was always thinking, wait, what does the Torah have to say about this? What does halacha have to say? So he asked the following questions on this chapter. May one make a marriage proposal on one knee? He made sure to tell me his opinion on that before he proposed. Is it permitted to propose to one's potential kala in front of others, meaning Adim? And is it permitted to pull a prank on others? What does the Torah think about scaring someone and then telling them it was all in jest for a good cause? So he does that, and then what he does is he has a section called the Torah Perspective. The sources start with the pasuk in Chukas, an Chukas Akrim from Vayikra, Chukosem lo terechu, and then the Gemara, he quotes the Rama, which is an Acharon, the Ma'arik in Acharon, then he has Rav Moshe Feinstein and Rav Ovadia Yosef. So you get a pretty good spectrum there, and then he brings it in the summary down to the bottom line. So if you're really pressed for time, or you feel like your Shabbos table is more appropriate for a quick version of it, you can honestly just read the stories, the question, discussion, and then read the summary, which is a quick recap. And he has like halacha l'maisa. So can you do it? What if your son's proposing tonight? Can he get down on one knee?
Okay, so I think that's a good example. And you mentioned also some of the sources that he used. You could see the variety of sources that he used. And you mentioned how he was always compiling and putting things together. So what was the process of writing this book? Because he said he had it for a while, and then he was always adding to it, and then he decided eventually to turn it into 2 volumes here.
Okay, so he published the first book in 2019. That was Learning the News. It was shortly after we made Aliyah. And then he decided I'm going to continue because he already had hundreds of these news stories all written up already. So the process was taking the rest of them, approaching the publisher, saying, I want to do it again. The publisher said, it's way too much for one book. You have like 64 stories, each of them with several pages. So let's do it by the Parsha and make it really an interactive Shabbos table companion, which some people were using the first one for already. So he does that, and he set out to just kind of tidy it up, put it according to different parshios and the psukim that it connected with. It's loosely, but it's definitely a fun spin if you're talking about, Yitzchak and getting married, and then you go into proposal pranks. It's definitely fun. When he started with the first book, he originally said, it's really just about the Torah. I don't want any attention. So that's why, in that first interview, he says nothing about himself. I re-listened to it. It's probably like 10 minutes. And the publisher actually wanted him to do some like speaking arrangements where he could do book signings, book launches, and he said absolutely not, because this isn't about me. That was really it for the first one. He put out some ads, and that was it. For the second one, he cleaned it up a little bit and brought it to the publisher, a different publisher, to do it a second time with Adir this time. And I want to say that along the way, in 2022, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And after that, he had 3 surgeries. He flew to various places around the world for lots of treatments. And he brought the book with him. He brought the computer, and he just kept writing. He kept working. He kept editing, because there was a lot of editing work to make it just fit so neatly into the organized structure of each chapter and in the Parsha framework. And he did it. I remember the day before one of his surgeries in San Francisco, he said, "Okay, can you just go over this little part with me? The publisher wants to, go over this." Because to him, it wasn't a question of stopping. It was, as soon as he started this in 2013, he was going to get all of this out there. He knew he had something to share, so he did.
Who would you say this book is meant for?
So I think this is something very special about this book. The beauty is that it could be picked up by a person with beginner skills, someone in high school, a teenager. It's just some fun stories and really accessible learning to read about. It's written in a clear and engaging way. It makes everything very clear. When I looked it over with him, I remember I would say, wait, what are we talking about? Tchum, Shabbos, 4,000 feet up in the air. What does that mean? It's all very clearly spelled out. But on the other hand, the footnotes are so extensive. A lot of them are half a page. So you could ignore them if you want a quicker read, but a Talmid Chacham who's looking up a certain topic, and I've actually gotten messages from Rabbanim who were preparing a topic, and they said, "Oh, but then I saw all these marmakomos at the bottom that I never thought of." Because it was so many years, he felt it was gold, and he had to put them in there. So his footnotes are extensive, and he would not relent on that. He'll say, for more on this topic, see here, 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 and here. And he has lots of topics all over the gamut that you can kind of delve into more in depth if you want to. So this book is really for everyone.
What was he trying to accomplish with this book?
I think his mission was clear from the beginning. He was really a man on a mission. He knew he had a really unique way to present Torah, and he wanted to get it out there. When it was about himself, he never wanted to talk about himself. It was just about the Torah. But if he knew he had something, he knew it was his mission to share it. Which is why he didn't do those book signings. But he really just wanted to get this approach out to Torah so people could enjoy it and learn more Torah. When the new set came out, it came out in February of this past year, 2026. And he was nifter in March, a month later. And I'd like to give a special shout out and a thank you to my brother-in-law, Rav Moshe Pestin, and Rav Zevi Trank, who at the very end, with just the final technical decisions, Simcha couldn't do it anymore, and they just worked day and night to make it come out so he could appreciate it. And so when it finally came out in February, Simcha was very sick, and our Rav of our shul, Rav Chaim Eisenstein, said, "I'm coming over. This is a big celebration, and we're not going to miss it." So he brought a l'chaim, and he started sharing what he already had gained from the Sefer. He invited some other men from the community to play music and to sing with Simcha. He sat in the middle, and I have to tell you, his face was beaming with pride, but it wasn't his own pride, because I honestly thought he would ask people to leave, because he never let people compliment him, and they were complimenting him a lot. But he didn't, because he realized it was past him already. It was his mission that got out. It was the Torah. And so he sat there beaming when they sang his favorite song, Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah. And it was clear to him that he had accomplished his mission. He set out to write the Sefer and to have the Torah come forth. And people were telling him, "You did it." And so he just sat there smiling, and he knew he did it. And so that's why I'm so thankful for this opportunity, because I feel like if more people could find out about it and be engaged by his Torah, and that will make him continue smiling because I think he really has a lot to offer.
And I'll link to the prior episode in the show notes as well, so you can hear from Rav Simcha Zichron Avrocha himself. For those interested, you can hear that original episode we did a couple of years ago where he discussed the first book, Learning the News. And I'll also link to this book. I think 2 volumes that you can purchase. I think it's 260 pages or so, and 280 pages and like 360 pages. So decent sized volumes here, the 2 volumes in the Torah. So I will link to those. They should be available in the farm stores, and I'll link to them. They're available on Amazon, available on I think it's Feldheim's website. It distributes Adir in America.
And in Eretz Yisrael at Manny's, Pomerantz, and also on their websites.
Right, and I think it's around. I want to just say the list price here. Do you know the list price offhand?
Yeah, it's 130 shekel in Israel, and it's $34.99 in America.
For 2 volumes, you get for that price, which is today's book prices might be 1 volume for around that. Okay, so I just want to end off with one thing is, I know we had been talking before to prepare for this, and you mentioned that and you have been mentioning throughout this episode, I have all these files on his computer. Is there more material that you plan on one day putting out more books from him?
There's a lot more out there, to the point where when he was already, the publisher was going through the second book for this book for a very long time, and he was waiting for it to come back from the publisher. People said, "So are you working on volume 3? He said, "No, I've moved on to other topics. I did that." And I just opened his computer to send you the manuscript. And I remembered he really has a lot more. People have been begging me for all the files he typed up for the weekly Parsha. I have it in a binder that he had printed and put in little page protectors he would go through each week with our kids. People are asking. I may have to hire someone to go through his computer and then make some posthumous works available. But there's definitely a lot more in store that he had organized all neatly in folders on his computer.
Okay, so he's a Baruch, and his neshama should have an aliyah. And thank you, Rena, for joining me to talk about these two new svarim, 2 new books, and your husband's work.
Thank you for the opportunity.